Sweet. Okay, I'll get started. Welcome. I'm going to be going over our new Chrome extension, which we're super excited about. There's a lot to explain, so I thought a webinar would be the best way to run through exactly what the extension can do. Okay, so just for context, everybody, if you go to Chrome extension store and you visit the Gumloop page, so just look up Gumloop, you'll find the extension and you'll be able to add it to your Chrome browser. If you haven't done that, I would recommend doing it now so that you can actually follow along in the tutorial. That will hopefully be more fun if you can build stuff in real time. Once you add it to your browser, there'll be a big button that says add Chrome extension. I'd recommend pinning it here so that you're able to always see it. You'll see this little Gumloop logo in your browser. Once you pin it, makes it more accessible, one less click. And next step will be signing in. So you click on the Chrome extension, you'll be prompted to sign in. You need to sign in with the same account that you signed into Gumloop with, because you're using the same account and it's showing you a lot of the same data. So make sure you do that. Assuming that everyone has done that, I will dive into explaining why we built this and why it's cool. So the Chrome extension can do two main things. It can run Gumloop flows with the input of your screen, or the content of your screen as input, which is useful in a few ways. I'll walk through full demos and build flows that are Chrome extension compatible in a second. And the second thing it can do, which is completely different, but equally as interesting, I think, is being able to record browser interactions and replay them. Either replaying it from your Chrome extension or replaying it from a Gumloop flow, which is also insane. So I'll start off with the simpler of the two, the running of tasks. I think that's a little more straightforward as a first use case. So basically the problem we were trying to solve is when you build a Gumloop flow, it's kind of annoying sometimes if, let's say I build a tool that's really good at processing a LinkedIn profile, but I want my coworker to use it every time they find an interesting candidate. Let's say we're recruiters or something. I want to build a tool that is accessible to them and they don't have to worry about what Gumloop is. They can just use the tool that I built. And we thought there's no better way to make a tool accessible than to embed it directly in your browser. So let's say I go to a LinkedIn profile. I'll go to my own. And I'm a recruiter looking at this person's profile and I want to extract information about them, into our CRM or this lead database. I can make a flow that will capture the content of the screen and then do all this AI analysis and dump it into Google Sheet within a few seconds. So I'll start from scratch. I think that'll be the best way to do this. I'll make a new flow. And in order for not all flows will appear in this Chrome extension, only flows that have this browser extension input will be present in your Chrome extension, because they work very differently. This is expecting you to run it via the Chrome extension, and you need to specify what the action you want to perform is. So whether you want to screenshot the page you're looking at, get all the URLs in the page, screenshot the full page. In this case, I just want to scrape the content that is on my screen and feed that as input to this flow. So I'm going to click scrape. And then I should, if I were to, let's say, save this, I'll call this workshop LinkedIn scrape, and save this as workshop workbook. I should have access to this flow, even though it's doing nothing right now. It will appear in my Chrome extension list. So workshop LinkedIn scrape is right here. I'm able to press play. Nothing would happen other than the content of my screen being scraped. But now is where I build the next step of the flow. So let's say I want to do the simplest flow possible. I just want to extract this into a Google Sheet. So let me make a new Google Sheet, sheets.new. I'm going to specify the headers. So I'll say full name or name, title. I want their location. I want their university. let's say that's good for now. That's all the data I want, and I'll call this like LinkedIn candidates. I can take this Google Sheet, pass it into my flow, and then I'll pass it into my flow. I could use a Google Sheet writer and a data extractor to do this, but I'm going to use our new extract data table, which I think is just way simpler. You can specify a link. AI is going to look at all of the columns in your sheet and come up with a schema automatically. So it thinks name is the full name of the person, title is their professional or academic title, location, and university. It nailed it. I only want one row to be extracted, and I'll just pass this in. So now I'll save it. And then if I go to my LinkedIn profile and I run workshop LinkedIn scrape on it, it will now scan my whole screen, get all the content, feed that into the flow I just built, and we should see the Google Sheet be populated in a second. I'll just make, okay, there we go. Cool. So 2 nodes, and the Chrome extension means I have like a LinkedIn processing flow built directly into my browser. Obviously, this is like a super simple use case. I would recommend having like way more analysis on top of it. Like you can get all of their work history. You can have AI categorize them as like a senior, mid-level, or junior engineer based on like the custom criteria you define. You can add a bunch of like web searches that look for other profiles of theirs. It really is limitless what you can do, but the main value proposition here is that you can now bake these flows directly into your extension and use them wherever. We also support workspaces so for like pro users who have access to workspaces. Is it sensitive to LinkedIn updating their HTML? No, it's not. It's getting all of the raw content. And the beauty of AI and web scraping is that it's able to make sense of content, even if it changes in format. So yeah, it's not sensitive at all. They could completely update their UX and UI tomorrow. As long as the information is still on the page, the AI will be able to extract the key pieces you care about. Hopefully that answers the question. All right. Next is browser recording. I'm going to go deeper into both of these topics and make more complex flows, but browser recording, I just want to introduce the idea of it near the front of this workshop. So it's completely separate. It can be used at in like simultaneously, I guess, but it's a separate idea. So let's say I go to like google.com. This is a really contrived example, but I think it illustrates it well. I want to record some pattern of, I don't know, clicking through an internal dashboard. I'll just do Google searching for now because it's straightforward. But what I'll do is I will go to record actions. I will hit record. And then I can go about my day. Like I can type, who invented the wheel? Press enter. Click on this. Okay, that's it. That's a pretty basic page. And I'll press stop. So I'll stop the recording and I'll call it search for random thing. I'll just call it search. That's a dumb name. Search. Now that task, or in the run task tab, I'll have access to this replay called search. And this is the first way you can interact with replays. You can replay them from your Chrome extension themselves. So I'll press search. It'll say like, are you sure you want to run this like, replay on the page you're on? I want to go back to where I started because that's where it'll make sense. And I'm not touching my screen. It's just doing what I did exactly how I did it. The LLM is kind of making sense of what you clicked on to fuzzy match things. But that is the first way you can use browser replays. I think it's useful if you have like, let's say a really repetitive internal dashboard thing you have to do all the time. You'll never have to write Selenium to do it now. You can just like bake it into your browser. This one is a little more HTML sensitive to your question, Arjun, because it's actually like using flares and IDs and stuff from the HTML, but it's fuzzy matching, so it's not as fragile. Would you be able to use this as a DM appointment setter on Twitter or Instagram? I think so. What is an appointment setter? Can you ask another question and elaborate? I guess just you're DMing people, asking them to chat. I'll wait for your answer and continue. Um, okay, so that's the first way you can use the recordings. The second way, appointment setter is someone like the user who wants to set a calendar sales call. I think so. Basically, anything you can do in your browser, you can automate with a recording. There's a couple kind of like cheeky things, which I'll show you when you're trying to use those replays as part of your flows. Because oftentimes when we were building for users who were doing like web scraping tasks, they would often like hit this blocker where they're like, I want to click on view more, or I want to see this information behind this tab, but we only do like page scraping. So we weren't able to interact with the page. And they would have to write custom Selenium or use our really cumbersome web agent scraper node in order to take action on the page. But now with the replay, they're able to just record their action and then use that as a part of their web scraping flow. Can I use replay to automate logging into a platform? Absolutely. Yeah. Okay, so when I drag in the browser replay node, it's going to show me all of my replays. I think search is the one that I was using. Can this get past I'm not a robot? It can't get past CAPTCHA, but it can use your browser cookies. So it can look exactly like, is there a workaround for CAPTCHA? Not at the moment. No. But okay, so with this browser replay node, you can choose the recording that you want, and you can also, it's whenever you have a text input in that recording, it will expose that as a dynamic input. So I could pass in like the search query could be who invented fire instead, and it would perform that series of actions, but with a dynamic input. So if let's say you had you're logging into your internal dashboard and you have a username and password, you can pass those in dynamically. It would expose username and password as dynamic variables. And okay, here is another thing. Sometimes if you want to scrape or play these recordings on a website, they're going to stop you because they can tell that you're running on an external server unless you have your browser cookies specified. So if you click this button, let's say like I wanted to do this on linkedin.com. That was like the starting point. That doesn't make much sense for this recording, but I would click use my browser cookies, and it's going to open LinkedIn. It's going to grab my cookies and it's going to save them in the node so that when you run this flow in the future, it's using your actual cookies. Hopefully that makes sense. A little confusing, but it's a kind of a more advanced feature if you need to get around, like, are you a bot or not? Okay, let me show you a live example with Indeed, or just a job board if you wanted to get job listings from a job board and you found it really cumbersome. I have a recording that will go to Indeed and look up software engineering roles. So if I press play, we can see what that recording is. It goes type software engineering, presses enter, and then it scrolls to the bottom. So everything loads. Let's say I want to use this replay in my flow, not from me sitting with my browser open doing this. I can go back to my flow over here. I'll delete the input, and I want to choose my Indeed recording. You'll see that the job search input is like the text. So it's the word software engineer, but we can swap it out for anything else. I'm going to specify the starting URL. So this is the starting URL I want to start with. And I want the action to be scrape. And then I want to dump it in a Google Sheet as well. I think that's a good example. You can do way more with this, but it's just a quick, if we're focusing on the Chrome extension, this is a good starting point. I'll add another extract to table node. I already have this Google Sheet made. which gets role name, location, salary range, and description. I'll go back to my flow and just paste that in. It's going to auto update the schema. And it will, yeah, it'll write the schema. So like name is the name of the job, geographic location. Yeah, all of this makes sense. I want it to use advanced browsing, which is just like a more sophisticated service under the hood that's hosting your replay and running it for you. I don't want it to use my browser cookies, and I'll just press run. So it's going to use software engineering as the term. I'll edit that in a second so we can do like multiple terms. But since it's using the advanced web scraping functionality, it'll take a little longer, up to like 25 seconds. But it should be visiting here on the server, typing in whatever you specified as the dynamic variable, scrolling to the bottom, and then parsing all this text and feeding it into an LLM to perform the task. Here. Okay, it's taking up to 30 seconds. Long time. Now it's extracting to the table. And we'll see that's not the right sheet here. Okay. So it got the descriptions. We tested this before, and some of these don't have salary ranges. Yeah. That is one thing you can do. Okay. And then let's say I want to have a dynamic input. I don't want software engineer. I want UX designer. I can pass in a dynamic variable. I'll call this like role, feed it into the job search parameter, and I'll say UX designer. Save it. And if I run it again, it'll pass in a dynamic variable and fill this. Okay, I see some questions in the chat. I'll try to address some while it's running. Can this replay tool do a nested scraping? Meaning, let's say clicking on each job, fetch the description, and then looping through the pagination to reach the end of count. At the moment, no, but we will be adding pagination support at some point in the future. So it could just like auto detect the page. You could record in your browser recording the like clicking of page 2 and page 3 and page 4, but it would only scrape one time. So you'd only be able to like, you could get page 7, but you'd have to start over to get page 6 and 5. How would you determine users' intent to scrape fully loading more jobs and not just first page? Yeah, that would require the pagination. It's not supported in version 1. We just tried to get the feature out ASAP. But yeah, okay, here are all the UX designer roles. And the idea here is this flow with this newly dynamic variable could be looped itself. So we'll call it like Indeed job search. And then I can make another flow that has a Google Sheet with 1,000 roles that I want to scrape from, Google Sheet Reader. And then I can use that whole flow I just built, the Indeed job search, as a subflow. So for every role type I care about, I can just throw in Indeed job search. And ideally, I mean, if this Google Sheet was populated with 1,000 different role types, it would be running this 1,000 times and filling my Google Sheet with all the data I care about. Okay. So someone asked, I want to remember everything I read. I do a lot of searching in my browser history to revisit things I faintly remember, but history search only hits title and meta keywords. Is it reasonable to use Gumloop workflow to scrape the content of every page I visit and to save a private store I can search? I'd imagine I'd like to start with scraping always on, but learn over time and exclude lists like email, online banking. Interesting question. You could have a general purpose like scrape to database or interesting content scraper flow. So like, let's say every time you see something you want to remember, you can just open your Gumloop extension and press run, and maybe it could dump all that information in your database where you build your vector search thing, or it dumps it into your Airtable. Kind of like a really smart AI powered bookmarking. You can do that. but I don't think it could auto run on every page and just index everything you've ever seen. That might be a bit out of scope or not what Gumloop is best for. Okay. I wanted to show off this flow. I think it's similar to the web scraping thing, but it does a bit more in terms of like alternative data searching. I think this is where things become more interesting when you can pair the content of your screen with other subflows that do other work so that the data that's being enriched is just better. So let's walk through what this does. I have a browser extension input node. Like we mentioned, if you have this node in your flows, it will appear in your available flows to run. Whatever content is scraped from my screen, if this is built for a LinkedIn profile, will be fed into this extract data node, which is quite big and long, but let's walk through it. It's getting the person's name, title, company, university, location. This part was kind of funny, but it determines if they're cracked as an engineer. And I specified the criteria. I'm like, have they founded a company? Have they worked as a founding engineer? Were they a staff engineer or a tech lead? And then give me like a 1-sentence summary about them. And then all of that data is fed into a Google Sheet, obviously, like we saw before, but it's also used to populate these three subflows. I wanted to see if I'm looking at a candidate, I want to determine like their background and add them to the sheet for later review, obviously. But I also wanted to find their GitHub, their Instagram, and their X account to see if like maybe they have other socials that are interesting to look at, like a crazy open source history, or they're super active on X. So I made a subflow that is just a general purpose. You pass in a website like x.com, you pass in a person's name, and then AI will Google search for that combination of person's name and website, look at the top 10 results and pick the most likely one that is them based on the description. So let me just run it for myself. So I'll go to linkedin.com. I will open my own profile. Let's say I'm a recruiter, and I believe I called this research blast candidate. So if I press run on this, you can just, it's already taken the content to the screen and started the flow. So you can actually like close the tab and move on with your life. Yeah, preview, I ran it right before this, but it's gonna write to this sheet again. So the flow is running in the background. It's running all three subflows. And yeah, it found my Twitter, it found my GitHub, and it didn't find my Instagram because I don't have one. So, I mean, I'm not one that I use or associate with my full name. Okay, and now, I mean, this is like a more nuanced LinkedIn scraper from what we built at the start of the workshop, but you can get even more intricate with it. You can have an AI step that writes a draft email, for example, and puts it directly in your inbox. You can have a data enrichment step. Where was I? Yeah, you can have a data enrichment step that gets contact information. You must, the question in chat is you must first find their social handle by manually searching, right? I can show you actually how we're finding social handles. It's basically emulating what I would have done manually to find someone's social. So like, let's say I want to find my own. It's a little nasty to look at, but it's actually quite simple when you break it down. It's just formatting this search. So like person's name and then site : x.com, linkedin.com, youtube.com, whatever. What this does is it forces Google to only return values that are from that domain. So if you Google my name and Twitter, you might find like random things about my Twitter. But if you restrict it to site : linkedin.com, odds are it's going to be a profile. I run it through a web search node. All of this if else stuff and this ugly additional nodes over here, that was just to handle the case where like someone doesn't have any search results and it breaks the flow. I get 7 results. You could get like 50 if you wanted, but I get 7. And then I format it into this little paragraph and I feed all of those into an extract data step where I say, give me the URL that is most likely this person's profile. Just like you would go to Google, you would look up whatever your name, x.com, and then you see the top 10 results. Somewhere in there, you're in your brain, you're looking and you're like, this is probably them because of the context. the context in this case is me passing in. I'm like, your job is to find the correct link for this platform. This is their name. This is the description of who they are, and I got that from their LinkedIn. That's just like extra information for the model to pick the best link from, or to pick the best link with, and then it returns the URL, and that URL goes into the Google Sheet. There's probably many different ways to get this sort of information. We could use like a enrich contact information sort of thing and get the person's like email from Apollo. We could get their phone number, all from like their LinkedIn URL, if that's the input that we want. We could totally do that. A completely separate approach to getting contact information. I just took this one. I find it really nice and reliable because Google's entire value proposition is like intelligent, useful search. So why not use that to find information? Okay. Next, I am going to I speed ran through the pre-built examples, so I'll go to our templates. We have a new browser extension friendly template category. Probably a better way to phrase that, but how can we build custom nodes? Can you tell me something about it? So custom nodes are coming soon. That's like the next release that we have. We're working on it. Like we spent all morning working on it, but they're not out yet, so I can't actually explain how they work. But you will be able to deploy totally custom nodes that AI writes the code for. You just describe what you want the node to do, and then it's live in production for you or your team. I think it's going to be pretty awesome. At the moment, we don't support that. Here's a kind of a basic subflow. It will, okay. I'm actually, okay, it gets all the URLs and it gets the tweet link, find the link to the tweet. Okay, so this, if I were to save this, I'll see categorize and save Twitter post should pop up in my flows here if I refresh. Categorize and save Twitter post. It seems I have two of them. If I go to Twitter and I want to click on this post, no. How did I mess that up? Here. I'll just press categorize and save Twitter post. It'll grab the content of my screen and dump everything into my Google Sheet. I can go visit this flow and see the link to the Google Sheet that I care about. Should be right here. Yeah. Okay. Let's check. Categorize and save Twitter post. Yeah. So, well, I don't even know. Is this it? Yeah. Okay. So it was categorizing it into a bunch of different buckets. It's kind of like a simple example just to illustrate what you can do, but it was labeling it as either like a tweet about business, personal, political, entertainment, education, and then writing that to the Google Sheet and outputting the link. Once again, you can go way more complex with this, and this is like just a starting point, but the AI being able to grab the content of your screen is useful because scraping Twitter, I mean, they have tons of bot detection. So if you tried to do this with like a standard scraping thing where like you hit an API and it's supposed to like avoid bot detection and stuff, that's not really worth it. You can, you already have access to the content because it's on your browser. So it's a much easier entry point if you just run it directly from your extension. Yeah, I could go through more examples, but I think the general gist of what you can do or how to get started has been covered. If anyone has any questions or maybe like a specific flow you'd like me to build, I can give it a swing. Maybe ideas for like how you would use this. A lot of our enterprise customers have been using it for like news story categorization and like really common day-to-day tasks that their employees are doing to parse large amounts of information. But yeah, that's been the initial use case. It's only been out for 2 days now, 3 days. Cool. Any questions? It's okay if not. I can run through some of the answered ones to see if I can elaborate. Okay. Should I be worried about getting banned from platforms such as X? I don't think so. No. You are not doing anything. You're not like getting content in a way that is nefarious. Like you already have access to this information. It's the same as you copy pasting the content of your screen and putting it somewhere else. Because it's the Chrome extension is literally just scanning your screen. So I don't think it's a concern. No. I can see some crazy good use cases for this for prospecting for businesses. Have you tried running it on LinkedIn job ads or searches at all? No, but we can try. I can, how do I, okay, I go to jobs. Let me go to this one. So you'd want it to maybe just extract all the data from this job specifically? Because I could do that if it's interesting to you. Can you build a flow from the start so we understand how to build a flow from the start and how it works? I can do that. The example you said, let's say comparing 2 data sets in Google Sheet and finding out differences. I don't think that's the best use case for Gumloop possible, but maybe I can build this prospecting flow that anonymous attendee number 1 requested. So going from what I see on the screen here to like a full report in Notion or something. Okay, let's do that. It'll take a couple minutes. So I'll make a new flow totally from scratch so you can see how you would do it. I press new flow. I want to add a browser extension input with a scrape as the action. We need to fix that. It should autosave. And I want to feed it into an Ask AI node. And I want to ask GPT-4o to format this job posting information in Markdown. Do we support Markdown in Notion? Okay, so I'm going to dump this in a Notion page. Output, nothing else. Yeah, that's it. Let's see how this works. Okay, and then I'll go Notion. So I'll do Notion page writer, and the content is going to be the response from the LLM. The title is going to be, I don't know. Let me have another AI step, extract data, that just defines a title. The title of this job posting. And I'll put that into title, and I'll save it. And now I have this flow that will go from a job posting on like LinkedIn job search, and we'll make a completely new page formatted nicely in Notion. And I'm going to rename it. I'll call this job posting to Notion. I'll save this whole flow as like Notion stuff. Okay, now if I go back to the job posting, I refresh my flows. I have a lot of flows right now. Ideally, you'd have like only a few that are super useful. I'll press job posting to Notion, and we'll see it in action. It is starting the flow. It just takes a second. So it should output here the link so I can go check out the Notion page. Okay. And it's done. The output of the Notion writer should be the link to Notion. Boom. Okay. and it's the entire job posting. Let's make sure this is correct. This is what I ran it on. Yeah, Chief Executive Officer application. It formatted it perfectly. I mean, it kind of made a weird code block, but we can fix that. How do we actually fix that? Yeah, this is more of an issue with the Notion node because it was too smart and detected the markdown and set it to a markdown formatting editor. But yeah, you went from job posting, and then I can do it for this one too. And I'm like, this is all writing to this Notion database with independent pages. So we're like building a repertoire of nicely formatted AI processed postings. I could also like ask the prompt to take this job posting and write it in French. How could you do this for the first 3 to 5 listings in one shot? Good question. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You could make the first step an extract data step that gets the links for all 5. And then the second one be a it could be a web replay with cookies so that it's able to visit this and scrape the content. It would be a little harder, to be honest. I would recommend just like clicking on all 3 and then pressing play, play, play. Okay. Let me actually just open the extension to see this successful run. Okay, 3, 2, 1 here. Yeah. Okay, all the content is there. Basically exactly what was on the page, but just AI processed and verbatim. I think I would be like, I mean, you could, like I said this like 10 times, but you can make this flow as complicated or as simple as you'd like. This took like 30 seconds to make. I think there's a lot more nuance you could add to it. Yeah. All right, I think we're approaching the end of the workshop. If you have any last minute questions, feel free to type them in chat. Otherwise, I'd recommend joining the Discord if you're not there already. That's where you get the most free support and where we're announcing all of the new feature updates. We're also iterating quite heavily on the Chrome extension to make it more powerful and usable for people who love it. So if you have any feedback after using it, literally anything at all, like minor complaints, we'd love to hear it in the Discord because we will take it into account and fix things. And yeah, otherwise, hopefully you can start automating more stuff, no code involved. I think this paired with the custom node builder that we're releasing really soon will basically let you build totally custom software embedded in your browser without ever having to worry about code. Is there a way to download documents? Let's say a job app has a demo project doc. No, actually, right now, but we can add support for that. As a way of dealing with pagination in the short term, could you record a separate action? Yeah, you could actually. You could. The only problem is it takes one action at the end of the recording. So the scrape action that is getting all the content from the page would have to happen. Like you would need to have one replay for the first page, one for the second, one for the third. That's just a byproduct of the way we set it up, but we can somehow support like maybe multiple scrapes throughout or something. It would just be a UX change we need to make to the recorder. Can you use Excel instead of Google Sheets? Yeah, we're adding native Microsoft 365 support really soon. You can create a CSV instead. So with our CSV nodes, you can create a CSV and then import that into Google Sheets. I like to recommend Google Sheets just because it's so easy to use on the platform and the headers auto-populate. And then you can export that into Google Sheets if you want. That would be my recommendation. But in the next month and a half or so, we'll have full Microsoft 365 support. So hopefully you can just use your Excel directly. All right, we are basically at time. How does form input work? Can you elaborate? I think you mean how does like writing into a form with the replay work? I can elaborate on that in Discord, Brian. Okay, I mean, if you do the recording, just to touch on it quickly, if you record your actions, let's say writing into a form, the replay node will auto detect that you've typed somewhere and make that a dynamic variable. So you could pass in different form inputs. Just like when I was typing into the job search, I typed in like software engineer, that dynamic variable, which was the word software engineer, becomes exposed as an input to a node like this, like context is dynamically inputted. Hopefully that makes sense. If it doesn't, I will help out in the Discord. Okay. Thanks for attending, everyone. I will upload a recording of this to YouTube. So see you on YouTube. Bye, everyone.